It's a podcast. Hello and welcome to Chaos Effect History. I'm your faithful host, McLean Hirschfield. With me, as always, is my good friend.
Hello, it's me, Tyler, again.
And today, our special guest joining us is
Alessandra Veron. What's up?
Welcome to the
Tyler.
team temporarily.
Happy
Tyler,
to be here.
last 4 years, what would you say was the biggest constant the last 4 years?
Pain.
How about a person that never shut up? Well, who would be that person that we seem to never be able to avoid?
That would be Mr. Donald John Trump, which has caused me a lot of pain.
So today is not going to be a normal episode. Normally we have a script and we talk about it. Tyler and I and our guests all just got back to college. I had a busy week because of that. So I didn't have time to write a script for my episode. So instead today we're doing a bit more of a free form episode. We're reflecting on the last 4 years of Donald Trump because he's history now.
Hopefully he stays in history.
Okay. So I wanted to start off. What does everybody remember about when Donald Trump was running for president, before he was president?
I remember exactly where I was when I found out he was running. I was, in the car on the way home from school, and I heard it on the radio, and we were all like, wow, that's pretty ridiculous. Can you believe that? The Celebrity Apprentice guy is running for president.
Man, first Home Alone 2 actor. Run for president.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was like when he first announced it, but I do remember his stiff competition with one Hillary Clinton, and I was admittedly I wasn't like a Trump supporter, but I was a Trump sympathizer, where I'm like, I don't love him, but like, man, Hillary Clinton really friggin' sucks, doesn't she? And how bad could it possibly be? And it was also, it was 2016, 2015 in the phase of the internet where it's just like everyone is just like anti-SJW, anti-this, anti-this, like, triggered, whatever. So I was all into the memes like how, the damn liberals are going to be real mad about this one.
I relate to that a lot. I was fascist adjacent up until 2016, 2015. I had gone through a really bad rough patch in high school that like drove me to this really dark place. It's funny how you tend to go right wing if you have nihilism and hatred towards everybody around you.
Yeah.
And then as I was coming back, I was just like, okay, Democrats are cool, Obama's cool. I'm just going to be a simple lib now. And then I didn't know who Donald Trump was. I don't watch a lot of like reality TV. So I'm like, who the hell's Donald Trump? And it's just like, oh, he's just a weird guy. Okay, he's not going to be president. And then he starts kicking everybody's ass in the numbers. Ted Cruz, whoever the hell else he ran against. Ben Carson,
Marco Rubio, John Kasich.
Yeah.
All of them.
Jeb Bush.
Oh my gosh, Jeb. Yeah. I remember initially everyone was like, yeah, Jeb Bush is going to be the nominee. And that very quickly faded, obviously. Conversely to what you guys were saying, I've always been, very, very liberal, very far left. And so at the time, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I didn't like Hillary Clinton. I still don't like Hillary Clinton. But when Donald Trump, entered the race, I was kind of like everyone else at first of like, okay, like this will blow over, whatever. It's just a guy, and the Republicans have like 8 candidates up there. Who cares? And I would always watch their debates just because I felt like it was important to be informed about what the other side was saying. But it soon became very clear that Donald Trump aside, none of those candidates were really talking about what I would call traditional Republican platform values. They were all quite extreme, and that extreme rhetoric was very much plowed over by Donald Trump, who completely changed the game with the way that he approached the situation. I would call John Kasich really the only true Republican who was ever on that debate stage.
Yeah.
In that election, and he was polling the lowest out of everybody. I mean, other than Donald Trump, the hope was Ted Cruz, which is the most depressing thing that's ever come out of my mouth.
Yeah. John Kasich was who my fam was rooting for at the time, and then we got Trump, and like, this is ridiculous. But haha, funny orange man, isn't he?
Yeah, I heard that from so many people in high school. I only knew one or two girls that I was friends with who were interested in Donald Trump's candidacy, but the guys that I was friends with, I would ask them and be like, "What is it about this guy?" And it was always, "Well, he's a businessman. Like he'll run the country like a business." And it was, "He's so funny." Like obviously high schoolers can't vote, but the idea that it was like people were voting for this guy because they thought he was funny, and it's like, oh, imagine 4 years of this, like it'll just be so entertaining. And now 4 years later we're all like on 1% battery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the time I'm like, how, like, all right, he's an idiot, but like, how badly can he fuck it up? We have a system of checks and balances. If he tries to do some stupid shit, they can stop.
So I started paying more attention. So what do you think is the most me way I would be introduced to a person like this being completely non-political? It's the dumbest way to learn about a politician running for something or anything going on in politics.
I don't know, like iFunny.
Saturday Night Live.
You know, that makes sense.
Alec Baldwin, baby.
So, and that was before the Alec Baldwin was the regular guy. That was like when they were testing who it should be. And at the time, I also was really getting into the idea of anarchism. Like, because I had gone from like right wing libertarianist survivalist to anarchy, like left wing anarchism. And like, there's a lot of crossover between anarcho-capitalist and anarcho-leftist. So there's like some mutuality, but I didn't get why so many people who were libertarian were for Trump when I started to hear more about him, because he was outwardly authoritarian in his things. He wasn't really promising business. He was promising like complete authoritarianism. And then I think at this point we could talk about like, yeah, we never thought it'd happen. I think there was a moment where I started to believe he could be president.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a moment at school. I go to school in Pennsylvania. We are all north of the Mason-Dixie line. And I just remember driving with my dad and seeing a lot of Trump signs, a lot of Confederate flags, stuff like that. And it felt weird. And like, I just thought, well, maybe it's because I live in a more rural area. But I remember I was going to visit my girlfriend at the time who did not live in a rural area. And this auto mechanic shop near her had put up a Trump billboard. Like something that's not coming down in a long time. And to me, I'm like seeing, well, this kind of area has people that hardcore. I imagine it's not just the rural areas then, is it? And that was to me the first time I thought, yeah, he could win this. And then he won. So does everybody remember him winning?
Oh
Yes,
my God.
I
Yeah.
specifically remember that, and I was at the time I was just like, dude, this is fucking hilarious. I can't wait to shit on the libs later. They're like absolutely crying because I know how much like they expected Hillary Clinton to win, because like it was really a curveball for everybody. Like unless you're like an ardent Trump supporter, like where you just like don't even listen to facts, like it was the writing on the wall was clear for everybody that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Like the polls were in her favor. Everybody was knew that Donald Trump was a fucking loser. So like when that happened, I'm looking at these stadiums that are filled with like celebration gear and everybody ready to like have a party, and then like just seeing the utter shock in their faces, I was like, yo, this is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I had a couple of months prior to Donald Trump being the nominee, I remember talking to my dad about it because things were not looking good. It was pretty much at that point between him and Ted Cruz of like, all right, is Ted Cruz gonna like save the Republican Party? Which those words coming out of my mouth. Oh my God.
That remind me to tell something I learned recently about what Lindsey Graham said about Ted Cruz once.
Yeah.
After you're done.
So I remember talking to my dad and being like, honestly, I think Donald Trump has a really good shot of being the nominee. And my dad was like, it would never be him. It would never be him. And my father's side of the family are liberal Jews versus my mom is liberal, but a lot of her side of the family is more conservative. They live in New Hampshire, like middle class, that like a middle class Republican. That's where her family comes from. So to hear this from my dad of being like, he'll never be the nominee, I was like, you should know. And then lo and behold, election day comes, and I was going for a walk with my best friend, one of my best friends at the time, who, similar to you, what you were saying, Tyler, was much further right at the time due to certain like internet wormholes. He's now a very stark leftist, but at the time he was like, if I could vote, I'd vote for Donald Trump. And then we were going for a walk, and he was like, what if Donald Trump wins? And I was like, oh, don't even say that. And he was like, I know it will never happen, but like, can you imagine? And I was like, oh, I don't want to. And that night, the two of us and a couple of other friends were at our friend's house. We were playing Jackbox at the beginning of the night, waiting for the numbers to start coming in. Then we start watching the electoral map. And I would say 5 of us there were like banking on Hillary Clinton. And then there was my friend who was pro-Trump. And then I had 2 friends who weren't really involved, but like if they had to choose, probably would have chosen Donald Trump. And things start to look worse. And like the room just starts getting quieter. And it gets to this point, like at a certain time of the night, where I was like, I just want to go home. Like, can we just go home? I can't watch this anymore. And by the time I get home, it's like pretty certain that Donald Trump has won the election. And I remember just going into my room and just crying. And that's like exactly like what you were saying, like, oh, like snowflake tears, whatever. But I wasn't crying because like my team lost. I was crying because like, as you know, a Jewish LGBT woman, like I just felt like so much of the country, including people that I'm related to, like very close relatives, just did not care enough about me to choose an option that was less appealing to them. And so that was really defeating. And I remember just being really scared of what was going to happen, because so much of the rhetoric that was being used in his campaign was so harmful to so many people, not just, you know, people like me, to disabled people, to people of color, you know, to Muslims and, you know, immigrants and all of these groups of people, that I was like, if I'm scared, if I'm this upset, I cannot imagine what these people are going through. And that was a lot of, you know, where the emotion I was feeling that night came from.
You know, so Tyler and I was part of the really dark side of the right wing internet, like when that was starting to become like 2014, 2015. And I left because I realized how bad it was getting. And part of what made me leave is my experience at school, I was not having a good time. I was made fun of, bullied, and I had taken out my anger on my bullies, and I just made generalizations to people about that. But eventually I was being led in by people who, you know, were LGBTQ, and I was sitting down with them. Like, I don't have problems with these people at all. But the problem was I was in these chat rooms where these people would feed in. And then when Donald Trump ran, I just said, oh, he's doing what those guys in the chat room did. He's finding these people and he's making them think he's fighting for them and that they're some part of special order. And I remember when he got elected, my friend and I were hanging out because we were always at school early, and he was just like shaking, angry. Like he wasn't even sad; he was just angry. And I said, because at first I'm like, well, you know, he's just the president; he can't be bad. And he's like, I asked him what's going on. He's like, I'm just pissed about it. I said, well, he's just the president. I mean, he doesn't have as much power as we think he does. And then he said, you don't get it though. It's not just because he's president. It's because he's president now. Every motherfucker, I should preface this, he's Puerto Rican. Every motherfucker is going to think it's okay to say the shit that he's been saying to me now, to anybody. They're going to say it to all of us. They're going to make the fun of us. They're going to be fucking racist out the gate, you know? It's not, you know, and and that was the first I realized that it's not just the policy that was affecting people. Trump was beyond the president. It became a movement. It became a style. And I started seeing this I went to a very small school. My graduating class was 38.
Oh wow.
And a lot of the people who went to my school were upper class. I was on the lower epsilon of that tier, and I am by far like upper middle class. And I noticed that it was always the people who, because I at the time I was more of a liberal. I was just liberal, probably libertarian, anarchist. So I'm like, okay, well, they know what they're doing with their money. Everybody, and so there must be smart people if they have money, but they're like, oh, I realize they have their money because they're okay with this evil ideology of power. And this is kind of what radicalized me is I was seeing how power was being used to consolidate money to these people. Um, and that was something I started to realize is that this was a movement beyond. And I remember at the time in the internet, like these terms that we all know, like Proud Boys, alt right, Boogaloo Boys. I had remember that year those terms starting to pop up. Gavin McInnes creating the Proud Boys. The Pepe meme became a symbol of Trump and the alt right.
And the previous perfection symbol became white power.
So it's this symbol it's the okay symbol. This is what we use to say okay in diving because this means up, this means down. So we use this as okay. My dad and I would do that all the time. We don't do that anymore because we're both scuba divers. But if you do that above water, everybody assumes you're a racist now. And I hate that.
Can't even play the circle game anymore.
Everything.
Yeah. The Boogaloo Boys popped up, and that was another thing. And it was it was almost if it was just a very weird experience. And I think, we had Obama stick around, and then 2017 came, he was made president. And the Muslim ban was the first thing he put in place.
Yeah.
That was his first priority. That was January 27th.
Yeah, I looked it up to watch what he had said about it at the time. And the quote, Donald Trump said this. He said, Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. That there is a video of that. That is what he said. So all the people who are talking like, oh no, it's these, threats and stuff, like, no, it was openly xenophobic. And that's why the first two proposals were struck down by federal courts. But, of course, June 2018, the third one was the Supreme Court said it was cool. And until Biden, it was there. And it originated as a list of 7 and ended as a list of 13 because they added 6 more in sometime in 2020. I don't quite remember when.
And Islamophobia was very, very, very big at the time.
It has been since 9/11. Yeah, it's been
since 9/11, but it feels like at that time there was a spike, more so than there is now. Even I think now it feels like the race and pendulum shifts depending on what's the biggest concern to the right wing.
Yeah.
Now that like ISIS is like kind of gone, nobody really is thinking about the Muslims anymore. But it's just,
exactly.
Black
it's like
Lives
which
Matter blew up, so now we're going to talk about the Black people.
Right. Yeah. It's like which group of people of color is the quote unquote biggest problem for the right wing right now?
Because
and at the time it was the Muslims, and right now it's Black people. And it always, in recent times has alternated between the two. And you have Latin Americans thrown in when it's convenient. And that's really what it is. It's like, who can we blame right now? Who is the easiest to blame?
Yeah.
And Latin Americans is really a very I have had a lot of friends who are Latin American. One of my best friends is Puerto Rican, not Latin American, but he's considered a Latino. I remember, like, I think he once put it, it's like, the thing is, when they look at a Black person, they hate a Black person. When they look at a Mexican or a Hispanic person, they pity them, and they don't see us as a threat. They just see us as lesser all around. He said, like, they see us as disposable labor, and that's why people make jokes about us being gardeners, because they see us as I think he's put it, they see us as like the new slave.
Yeah,
That's
it's
exactly how
it's so, I think, pervasive, this idea that people who are from anywhere that isn't America are lesser, particularly people of color, of course, because, white people, coming from Europe, particularly Western Europe, and people in Canada and whatever, it's like kind of white people in America see it as cut from the same cloth. So it's like, oh, like my great great grandmother came from Sweden, like the Swedes aren't a problem. But like, oh, have you ever heard of Pablo Escobar? Like, those Latinos, like, and that's the kind of idea that's promoted. And it's amazing to me that Donald Trump was able to slip in so much disrespect to Western nations during his presidency. He called Trudeau dishonest, Macron foolish, Turnbull the worst call he's had by far when he was making, phone calls to different nations. Like, he has not pulled punches from Western
I
countries.
didn't
But
realize.
when it comes to attacking the people of a country, he reserves that for countries that, in America we would refer to as minorities.
he was just
Or
talking shit.
countries we'd refer to third world, even though I think third
yeah.
world is the most derogatory term, in my opinion, to give a country that when you are vastly responsible for the conditions of said country. We, talking about the thing, especially regarding Islamophobia, this is also, I'm trying to coincide what's going on outside of just him being president. This is when in Portland, Oregon, you'd see a man was stabbed trying to defend two Muslim girls from a guy who was assaulting them. They would hear stories over and over again about people just berating as attacking Muslim people. And then you just get from the right wing these more and more infuriating, outlandish stories of stuff. And the one thing that I always find very interesting is I'm going to preface this. I'm an agnostic. I don't have any general belief in religion. I observe religions with I'm impartial to them. But anytime I hear criticism of Muslim culture, it is something that the conservative agenda regarding Christianity has tried to put forward. Oh, over there they punish women for losing their virginity. Isn't that like one of the big movements of the Christian movement? It's like, oh well, if you were gay over there, they would kill you. And like if you're gay over here, there's a strong chance you get killed.
Yeah, I mean, we think about, it's 2020 now. I was gonna say 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, just a bit. Matthew Shepard was beaten to death because he was gay, and you go back to even the 70s, where most people who were alive in the 70s are alive now. You have people like Marsha P. Johnson, who, was drowned, pushed over a bridge because she was trans. Like this, people have been killed for being gay, not by the government, but by the people, which, is as bad in the sense that the lack of safety is still there, and less so now. But in the 20th century, the government didn't care. They did not care that LGBT people were being persecuted by other citizens. I mean, you look at Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan all but ignored AIDS because, let the gays die. Who cares?
Even though Roy Cohn, who was on his group, was a pretty much outly gay man. And, quick story on Roy Cohn, bastard in life. Even though he died of AIDS, and people wanted to, condemn him because he was a traitor to anybody who was gay. Probably one of the most badass things the LGBTQ plus community ever did was include his name on the AIDS quilt with just 3 words, which was, I believe, victim, coward, bully. And it's just, I hope that's the type of legacy. Like, my biggest fear is Trump is going to have the same kind of rehabilitation that the Bushes had.
I mean, I think a large part of the Bush rehabilitation is owed to how horrible Donald Trump is. I mean, when both former President Bushes were alive, I remember when it was like the 5 living presidents, Carter, Bush, Clinton, and Obama, all came together during the campaign and said, I'm with her. Don't elect Donald Trump. He doesn't have what it takes.
Right.
And, this year it was the same for Joe Biden, though less of a statement, because it was a lot clearer, I think, to a lot of people that Donald Trump was unfit for the role. But I remember, as a person who has disdain for all of those people except really Jimmy Carter, I think Jimmy Carter was a great man who just wasn't very good at foreign policy, and it bit him. He wasn't very good at the job of being president, but he's a good person.
Jimmy Carter is a man who spent the later part of his life building houses for those in need.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter is amazing.
Yeah.
Which I believe is the only thing you should be allowed to do after you run for president.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
But
Like, his
I can't stand the
after this presidency
Bushes.
is so much greater.
Yeah, I can't stand the Bushes. I can't stand Bill Clinton. At the time, I was an Obama fan. I have since strayed away from the Obama loyalist path. I'm not, very happy with him. I sound like a grandmother. I'm not happy with him.
No, I'm mixed on Obama.
I have respect for him and some of the things that he did, but I overall have a negative view of him in the presidency. That said, at the time I was like, wow, like, look at this, across the aisle, everyone is coming together and they're saying, not this guy, Republicans, shouldn't that speak to you? And of course, the answer to that question is no, it shouldn't. Or no, it doesn't, even if it should.
Donald Trump made it okay to be outwardly racist, and people just want to be outwardly racist.
Yeah, and I mean, it has, not glorified, but I think resulted in the romanticism of the Bush presidency for, textbook Republicans who are, or I would say platform Republicans, and not overall conservatives, the people who, align more with the ideas of Kasich, McCain, Bush, Romney, people like that who
your Lincoln Project Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. Lincoln Project Republicans.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lincoln Project, I want to talk about a lot of the media grifts that started popping up, because that's the thing I correlate the most is you had Ben Shapiro swearing that Donald Trump doesn't represent the Republican Party and he'd never vote from him, then going to defend every single decision Donald Trump would ever make. You had Dave Rubin, who used to be part of the Young Turks, which is a left-leaning news network, then leaving and claiming that the left wing lies and he's a classical liberal and that's why he's for Donald Trump. You have had Jordan Peterson, who's led this crusade of Nazi apologism and, not that badisms about the Civil War and Holocaust, which is anytime anybody denies the Holocaust, I believe you should get a right to punch that person in the face as hard as possible and do terrible things to them. Because
I mean,
an outstanding number of people died. An outstanding number of people died.
Yeah. I mean, as a person of Jewish descent, I remember it dawned on me when I was quite young, the difference in size between my dad's side of the family gatherings and my mom's side. My mom's side is Germans and Italians. There's a ton of them. My dad's side, it's pretty much, I have 2 immediate cousins. There's my grandparents, my aunt and uncle. And then there's, distant family that I don't really know. And it one day it dawned on me, it's like, oh, right. The people who would have been responsible for the continuation of family lineage were murdered.
Yeah,
by the government.
I'm part Jewish and I'm very removed from the Holocaust. Some of my family was Jewish, was in America before that, and they kept it a secret they were Jewish because America is just as anti-Semitic as any other country was at the time.
Oh yeah, America's extremely anti-Semitic.
I believe to be born in a hospital, my grandfather's mother lied about her heritage. So, and also just. I have a family I come from a line of people who fought in World War II, and they were all heroes. Like they were the guys who stormed Normandy, dropped the bombs over Germany, and fought in the Pacific. They were heroes as far. And then when people, so we're going to talk about Charlottesville now. When people were marching on America with the swastika, the ultimate symbol of evil in any textbook, in any context, and Donald Trump came out and said, well, there were good people on both sides.
Very fine people. Yep.
That
was the moment where I decided that you cannot reason with the right, because Trump was inevitable. Like I try to justify that there are good right wingers, but now it seems like he was the inevitable lead up to what they had allowed in their party for so long. You know,
I mean, you account for, you know, you can say, I'll bet I think that it's a dumb point. Dumb is an understatement. Oh, like people carrying Confederate flags, like they're just, you know, like ignorant, like they think that's their history because they're from the South. And, you know, people carrying Nazi flags, like they're just being edgy. But you take it a step further and remember that they were carrying torches and shouting, Jews will not replace us. And those, in the eyes of the president, are very fine people. And that's disgusting. Like there is,
right.
like watching that, like it like scares me all over again. I saw BlacKkKlansman, Spike Lee's 2018 film, for the first time earlier this year for a report I was writing, and he plays clips from the Charlottesville terrorist, I would call it a terrorist attack, and just watching it, like I was holding back tears because it is terrifying. Not just that that's happening here, but how many people are part of that.
I remember watching the clips from after BlacKkKlansman. I had to do night check one night, and I'm pretty sure I was doing it by myself. Night checks when we go out and take care of the horses. And I just got so angry that I picked up a bale of hay and chucked it maybe 12 feet down the barn. I'm not a very strong person, but I was just so angry.
That's very rural of you.
That was
You ever being so mad you just chuck a hay bale? And I just remember being like angry and tears about seeing that and reminding me. And I'm still getting I'm getting worked up right now thinking about it. And I get part of it's guilt for me. I am passing for whatever the most ultra conservative standard is. The only thing is I don't have blonde hair, blue eyes. I am a kind of tall, very generic looking white dude. And knowing that that's easy for me, just something about that bothers me. Why it's not, to me, it should be easy for everybody. And it makes me incredibly angry. I feel guilty that, you know, there's that saying, or there's that thing like, oh, people are just, you know, are just choosing to be on the side of these things because of white guilt. Yeah, you should feel white guilt when you see horrible things happening to people. And you know it's because of other people that look like you. And how and thinking about how, like, you know, I read through history, and I was joking about this, Tyler, on our last episode, that this is the face of evil for the last hundreds and hundreds of years. But this really is. This is the face that ended civilizations, that white people, and it's infuriating that then you have people defending the South in the Civil War, defending Germany, doing this. I mean, it's, and at the same time, you had this president who they turned into a demigod of that ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like with regard to white guilt, I think it's just important. And I know I've talked to quite a few people, especially since coming to college, because of course Quinnipiac is so vastly majority white, that so many of the conversations I've had have kind of veered in that direction. And what I always tell people is that, like, of course, you know, like, it's not about you, which, you know, of course, you know, and that bad feeling that you have, it needs to turn into a feeling of responsibility. Like, forget feeling bad, feel responsible to make up for the actions of your ancestors, you know? And of course, like, I have, you know, my minority check marks, whatever, I'm bi, I'm Jewish, I'm, all these things. But at the end of the day, like, I have, a duty as a white person, as a white woman, to make up for what the people who came before me did to people of color, to, people of other religions who have been oppressed here and everywhere. It's, and every person should have that responsibility. Every person should feel responsible for each other. And that's something that the United States very much lacks. I mean, tying it back to Donald Trump, John McCain was the only one, standing between the Republican Party and the repeal of Obamacare. If it wasn't for him, it would have been gone.
Yeah, and
that's with healthcare, and you look at Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and the squad, who are all like, yes, give everyone healthcare, please. The other countries that have universal healthcare or variations on the proposed U.S. plans of universal healthcare, all of those people look at it like that's called taking care of your neighbor. Like, we're all responsible for each other. Whereas the United States is a very competitive atmosphere in every way. I mean, even the concept of the American dream is competitive. You want to be the best. You want to rise above everyone else. You want your white picket fence and fuck whoever you have to step on along the way to get there, because you'll be fine. I mean, that's where it is with, the tax cuts Donald Trump presented early in his presidency that, benefited rich people vastly. It's like, yeah, you guys will help me, so I'll help you. But all of you poor people who are going to vote for me, even if I stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shot somebody, I don't need to do anything for you because you'll vote for me anyway. And beyond a vote, you are useless to me.
Yeah, it was around Charlottesville where I realized, like, I've heard that quote before and I'm just like, no, there's no way people are gonna be that dumb. But it was around Charlottesville where it hit me like, oh shit, that quote is absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, you look at coronavirus, he didn't stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, but he sat in the Oval Office while hundreds of thousands of people died and just waited for it.
A civil war's worth of people have almost died.
Literally. And the thing that he said it's going to disappear one day, like a miracle. It will disappear. No, it won't. And I think that that's the attitude that Donald Trump has had throughout his entire presidency and arguably through his entire life. If you look at his business practices and things like that, if you can't fire the problem, just wait and it will go away. It's like, are you in third grade? Do you think there's a monster under your bed? If you cover your head with the blanket, it'll go away by the time the sun rises? No, like, you're running a country. People are dying. And 3 months ago, you defunded the organization that is supposed to find these things and alert you. It's ridiculous.
Part of this, speaking of classic economics, where he's just like, just wait and the economy will fix itself. Well, no, when you're like back in the Great Depression, that's what Herbert Hoover's economic advisors were telling him to do. And he's just like, yeah, sure, I guess that makes sense. But obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, like, if the economy is just not doing well, like, that happens. The economy is very elusive. It ebbs and flows, and it will always ebb and flow. And we will always hit really good highs and kind of shitty lows that, aren't, necessarily detrimental, particularly when we're, living under a capitalist system. Like, capitalism is built to do this every so often, depressions and recessions and whatnot. But the thing of it is when you are trying to fix a problem, looking at it economically is the issue. Herbert Hoover should not have been looking at the Great Depression like, the economy's bad. He should have been looking at it as, people are suffering. How do we help people despite the shitty economy? And by extension, fix the economy. And with Donald Trump, the concern with him wasn't people are sick, it was the economy's bad. Because before that, I think according to a Gallup poll, 68% of Americans who were polled were satisfied with the economy. Like, unemployment in February was at a 50-year low. Like, and that is an effect of the way that Donald Trump's presidency went. You look at 2017, 2018, that is attributed to Barack Obama's presidency, just like what Obama walked into in 2008 can be attributed to George Bush. But 2019, 2020, yeah, that's Trump's economy. And it
Obama's
tanked.
presidency he was given a recession, which was probably, the closest we'll get to like the Great Depression. It was a bad recession. It wasn't that bad, but it was bad.
It was
And
really
No, I remember my dad got laid off during that. It was really hard.
yeah, I mean, I was in a bit more luxury, but I do remember there were I was young at the time, but there were those moments where work kind of slowed. My dad's a contractor, so work kind of slowed down for him, and just you had those memories of things were like getting different. I didn't understand what was going on at the time. I was like 2008.
Yeah.
And then by 10, we were recovering and kind of starting to recover. But
yeah, I mean,
I want to clarify. I probably didn't word what I was saying because I was getting angry. What I was saying about white guilt is I agree with you. We have to use our position, and to me, it's getting angry with people who are like me and probably come from a similar background for not understanding why because of who they are, they have an automatic privilege in life, or in this country at least. And you can't. And it's true. There are white people who are disenfranchised in this country, but there are privileges that you have as a white man in this country. There are a lot of privileges you have that a lot of other people don't. And that, I guess I was trying to say that. I want to clarify that because I could realize I was getting angry talking over myself. But Trump's plan of ultra capitalism mixed with fascism was something. And Trump is a fascist. There will be
no getting around it.
It's
there will be actually libs and Republicans who are like a fascist. You do not have to have a swastika to be a fascist. You don't have to have.
There were fascists before Hitler. There have been fascists since, and there will be fascists.
The thing with Donald Trump and the Hitler comparison is that, like, how dare you compare Donald Trump to Hitler? Hitler was so awful and he killed millions of people, but we're not comparing Hitler to we're not comparing Donald Trump to Hitler into World War II Hitler. We're talking about pre-World War II, make Germany great again Hitler, where Donald Trump's rise to power very much matches.
Yeah, they're mirrors of each other. History doesn't entirely repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think that's one thing that people miss, is that they're like, oh, well, it's not exactly the same. So actually, but it's like, no, you have to look at this from a perspective that isn't linear. And I remember talking to my freshman, sophomore year roommate about history. And she was talking about how she was like, I wish, we didn't always have to look at, everything, take everything into context. And I was like, no, you have to, because everything now is the result of everything then. So as much as you can wish it was linear, it's not. Everything has been happening at the same time all over the world. And it's stressful and it's confusing, but it's the facts.
One of the things is like, you can't compare the detention centers at the border to concentration camps, because concentration camps were so much worse.
No, they were I'm gonna talk. So death camps, that is the Totenkopf. That is what they were in Germany. They were called concentration camps because yes, they were concentrations of minorities. That's also what's going on the border. That's what we did with the Japanese. That's what we did with the Philippines, and we actually kind of perfected how concentration camps work before Germany did.
Yeah, Germany looked at us. Germany looked at us for examples.
Germany saw how we kind of made the Native American. Tyler and I talked about this. There's a period in American textbooks where Native Americans exist. Then you have a gap, and then suddenly they don't exist as much anymore.
Right.
We kind of successfully genocided an entire culture of people.
Yeah, the greatest, if not one of the top 5 in history, most successfully executed, no pun intended, genocides is that of the indigenous people in North America
and
by the Europeans.
This could be a whole episode on its own, and I'm acknowledging that, but it needs to be noted that when you had things like the standoff of those young Republican dipshits with the Native people, and you had this old man, it had to be the greatest symbol of what what's going on in this country. This old man who's playing the song, the legacy of culture, that's been fighting against this oppressive system for centuries now. And then you have these dipshit smiling teenagers yelling, build the wall. Because at that point, build the wall, it became clear that it wasn't about securing the border, securing the nation.
Yeah.
It was a cry of,
it was us versus
this is our country. We want this to be a white nation. That's what it became.
Yeah.
White nationalism became a huge part of the Trump ticket. And, you know, we're going to start rolling forward, but like flash forward to the Proud Boys at DC. And one of the many things was that they, at one point, the Proud Boys did say have a few token minorities in it. And then suddenly a lot of them disappeared and they just went full force. Like, yeah, no, we're for this, you know, the West is best. You know, this is a white nation.
Yeah.
And that was just, it progressively went mask off as he went on.
Yeah, mask off in a lot of ways, huh?
Yeah. So let's start on I think, what's the part of the presidency that's going to be most important? Because we could talk about these minor things, the Covfefe, his standoff in North Korea, Fire and Fury.
Sharpie.
But 2020 is when things started to go downhill. And I want to take this back to a moment between me and Tyler. Tyler texted me, are we going to have a third world war? Me, what are you talking about? Then I look at Twitter. Oh, fuck, we're going to have a third world war. Because before coronavirus, before everything got incredibly terrible, this was January 3rd. The president assassinated the general of a country we are not at war with, Iran, which then led to one of the largest political, not political, but like most Cold War speed run, where Russia said, okay, well, we'll back the Iranians. Then China said they'd back the Iranians. And then everybody in the EU was picking apart who they'd side with or if they were going to be neutral. And Britain, of course, it's like, America's doing it, we'll do it.
Yeah, literally. Cut from the same cloth, us too.
Quite literally. And I had this moment of, is this the war my generation dies in, except this time we're the fascist bastards?
Yeah, and I mean, say what you want about Iran and what Iran does wrong. In that situation, the United States of America was in the wrong. We have no right, and very rarely in all of history have we ever had the right to meddle in such a way in the affairs of other nations. And it is something that we continuously do. And of course, as an American and as a human being, I don't want there to be a war. I don't think there should be any wars anywhere ever. And of course, I don't want, you know, my friends, my family, and you know, whomsoever to fall victim to, you know, the workings of a selfish government, which is always what happens in wars. But I could not, as a person with eyes and ears and a brain, say that the war was not our fault if it did happen, and that right. We were not in the wrong, because plain and simple, they had every right to go to war with us.
What we did is literally the reason World War I started. I mean, or World War II. It's the Japanese attacking. We did that essentially. And
and the assassination of a leader in the past, it could have been the only thing, but you look at it and it's always the straw that breaks the camel's back. If you look at the things that we have been doing with Iran over the last 4 or 5 years, we withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. We accuse them of, you know, keeping their blueprints and stockpiling uranium and continuing to develop weapons when they're not supposed to. We do all of these things that are just putting more straws on this camel's back. And then you assassinate a leader. What do you think is going to happen? And to be honest, I would not be surprised in the slightest if it was intentional, if the goal was to start an armed conflict to justify the military budget that has been, you know, highly contested, because wartime presidents have very good luck in elections. And I'm not saying that this is what Donald Trump did. I'm saying simply that I would not be at all
It's
surprised to
highly
find
likely.
that that was what was going
Think
on.
about this. None of us know a world where there hasn't been constantly some war going on.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there was a brief year or two where we were alive, and then after 9/11, no, there have always been troops. And it's the 1984 quote, "This war wasn't meant to be won."
Yes, exactly.
It is there's a reason that the draft isn't a thing, but there's such thing as a poverty draft, which is when people are so poor in your country, they're forced to do things. I listen to a lot of leftist podcasts, and the same story comes from a lot of them, and it's leftist veterans. Lines Led by Donkeys. See, the host, he grew up poor, joined the military so he could move forward in life, and he went through terrible, terrible things in the military, not just from the horrors of war, but from the horrors of how much this country doesn't care about you.
Oh yeah, no, the country does not care about veterans. Specifically, they don't care about poor people.
They don't care
Most
about
of that is a
women.
collaboration. And this is why, and this is a completely different conversation. It could be its own podcast, but I'm gonna say the hot take anyway, is that a lot of people, who are talking like ACAB and all of this anti-police stuff, they say, ACAB includes the military, and to an extent, that's a completely fair statement. But I think that it's incredibly important to remember that I would argue most of the people in the military are there because they don't have another option. That's not the job they've always wanted to do. And of course, there are people like that. I know people like that who, were talking in 6th grade about how they were going to join the Air Force. But so many other people are like, I need this to pay for my life. I need this. I have no other option.
I very much considered joining the military just so I can get through college.
Yeah, if I didn't have such strong opinions, and if I wasn't so vocal about those opinions, I might have considered joining the National Guard because, money. But
I tried to join the Air Force. I think I went, but I can't. I'm not allowed to fly planes, so I was out. But it was a very strong thing for me at one point, thinking about just the idea of dealing with debt and paying for college. That I considered, well, maybe I'll join the National Guard, or maybe. And then I remember I was reading a book, and they talked about this part where he was talking about. No, it was a book. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about being on deployment. And it said a Bradley showed up one day. Bradley's like a light tank, and there was just a driver inside, and the driver was crying scared. The driver was part of this convoy, and this Bradley had been hit by 3 separate IEDs. The first time their communications not out, they tried to go forward. Second time, both guys, the commander and the gunner, abandoned it with the rest of the crew. The driver doesn't know that though, because their radio's knocked out. Third time gets knocked out. They think he has to be dead. So they move on. They don't recover his body. They move on. Driver wakes up hours later in the middle of Iraq by himself. He'd been abandoned. The one rule that we've been taught about the military our entire life, leave no man behind, they had abandoned. And no officer should have let that happen. But that's just, they don't care about you. The individual at the end of the day is that and think about that. It used to be the troop was the highest thing, but then we realized the troops were average people. So then it had to be the special forces are who we care about, because that's now who they turn into their heroes. So these special forces, because the average troop is just an average person, probably will have negative things to say about their military experience. But now we have to go to these special forces guys who we let be cowboys doing whatever the hell they want. I mean, a goddamn war criminal was let off the hook by Donald Trump, given a pardon. Multiple war criminals were. People who executed civilians and hostages. Or not hostages. That's what they were. They were civilians who they captured and killed.
And here we go back to the same reason that we don't have universal health care, the same reason for so much of the oppressive tactics used by our government and by people in our society is that America is the nation of the individual. And Donald Trump embodies that. Donald Trump embodies this idea of be in it for yourself and you will succeed and you will become a rich man, you will own businesses, you could be president if you want to, and you can say whatever you want and no one's going to stop you. And that's the appeal. That's the appeal of Donald Trump, is that he justifies all of the things that so many people have been too scared to say. And he makes people believe that they too, by doing the same things he did, by coming out with all of these opinions, with all of these tactics and ideologies, that they can be like him. Consciously or subconsciously, Trump supporters want to be like Donald Trump. It's an idolization. You want to be like him. He's on a pedestal for you, and that's what you want.
And now we get past the war part of 2020, and 2020 to me kind of was, I got really annoyed at the beginning of 2020 because everybody was doing the roaring 20s. It's the 20s again.
Guilty.
Yay. Yeah, I know. I kind of brought that up on purpose.
No people in this room that are guilty.
You're really just calling us out right now.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Well,
We had fun.
It was a good
it's
time.
not the Great Gatsby, kids. 20s was a terrible time to be alive.
It was, and it is again. So
Well, I was just happy because like the 20s was really cool if you're white.
If you're
So-
a white man who made 6 figures a year. Yeah.
So I was just happy to be able to like experience the 20s as a brown man. It's like, you know what,
yeah, as
Man,
a gay, I was very excited.
man, if only people in the 20s weren't fucking awful.
Yeah, it was an aesthetic decision, and
But
the 20s are happening, just not the party part.
And then I remember
Yeah.
being in screenwriting class and somebody said, anybody else hear about this virus? And I said, yeah, it sounds pretty bad. And then I remember a professor I won't name saying, it's not as serious as what just happened in Iran. How innocent we all were.
yeah,
And this was and I'm not going to blame, he's not a bad guy for saying that. The media in this country played down the virus a lot. And then you start hearing
Everyone
these
played
stories.
down the virus.
You heard, oh, well, it's going here, it's going here, it's going here. And then it started happening in the European countries, the countries where they started really getting concerned because everybody there is.
Italy.
Because those are first world countries, and we expect them to know how to handle the situation. Like,
Yeah, not China. Not China. the
China's
second richest
more
country in the
first world than we are. And yes,
Yeah.
they're doing terrible dictatorship stuff.
China is a horrible place, but they have their shit together on a lot of levels that the United States does not, and that needs to be
Right.
recognized.
But
And then you started hearing about the cases in America. At first, it's not that bad. It's the swine flu. Remember the swine flu? The swine flu
I
was
remember
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
it's a really bad flu. Yeah. And then a lot of people started dying. And then
But it's not
Spring-
that many, McLean. Remember, more people die from the flu every year than are dying from coronavirus.
yeah, the
I just hemorrhaged. I'm joking.
the thing that lends credence to Alessandro, your theory earlier about how Donald Trump was like intentionally trying to start a war is when he started calling coronavirus the invisible enemy.
Yeah,
And I think he got mad that he couldn't turn this into his hero. He couldn't make this his Abe Lincoln Civil War. He couldn't make this his FDR World War II speech. He's like, well, I'm a wartime president now, but nobody humored him. Like, no,
and
this is
do you know what? If he had actually been a leader, if he had been presidential about it, this could have been his
Could have
civil
been.
war. This could have been his FDR.
Strong achievement.
I would never
he
give him the
said-
dignity to put him on the same level
And
as
neither would
Lincoln
I.
or
but-
FDR because
But in
he
terms of
doesn't-
events, this could have been
Right.
the thing that saved the Trump presidency. It was going to be one or the other. It was going to be the thing that saved it or the thing that damned it. And it
At
was the
the
latter.
very least, this could have been his 9/11.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd
And I
argue
mean-
this is why Bush got his time that he did.
Yeah. And had he not been like, oh, it's going to disappear, like it's going to disappear, it's fine, like the Chinese virus, the Kung flu, two things he actually called it.
The
Things would
China
have been
virus,
different.
ladies and gentlemen, and also him saying things like Kung flu, China virus, suddenly became a huge anti-Asian sentiment.
Yep.
Once again, the pendulum swing, and this is something that has happened a few times, but this was, very first. And I know a lot of I've listened to a lot of podcasts where Asian people themselves said, in America, we aren't as discriminated as other minorities, and but then this happened, and it seemed like we were suddenly, once again, very hated in this country.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing stories of like people people get angry with Chinese person in the street for the virus, and it was that. And then the most, I think, so I'm getting curious to ask everybody this because I think I have a very different perspective on but how do you remember the virus becoming a thing that was definitely happening here?
So, okay. One of my best friends has been going to college in Italy for the last few years, and she's here now. She just finished her senior year, but I was very, very clued in on coronavirus far earlier, and another good friend of mine was studying abroad there. So it was something that was in my, my field of view far earlier than, someone who probably had no ties to the European countries in which it was happening in a very severe way. But I remember cases popping up. I remember it was the West Coast, then it was Colorado, and then all of a sudden it's happening over here on the East Coast. And I'm from Massachusetts. I'm 20 minutes south of Boston, and I remember seeing an article that likened Boston to the next Italy in terms of, being just an epicenter of this virus. And that makes sense because Boston is, a very diverse city, both, not in just a racial way, but in terms of, we have a lot of it's a college city through and through. So we have people coming from everywhere, and it's spring break city. Time. Yeah, it's spring break, scattered throughout,
it's a business
late
city.
February, early March. Everyone's going in and out. So it makes sense. But, it was at that time. And, I intern at a convention called STN. It changes its location in the US every year. It's national convention. About 3,000 students go from everywhere. And we have people from Russia and China who come as well. The Chinese had already canceled their appearance at the convention. And a lot of schools were pulling out, including my hometown. And my TV teacher is the contest coordinator of that entire convention. And our fine arts director said, no, you're not going to DC for convention. It's not happening. And then, I was in DC for the convention, got there. I was there for about 20 minutes. And one of the higher ups came into the room where we were all reuniting with the interns. And he said, convention's canceled. So enjoy these 5 days in DC. And this had been right after that outbreak at the church. Where one of the attendees had COVID and spread it to 500 people. So that was kind of the whole timeline from when it was went from being in my peripherals to actually impacting my life.
Yeah. You can go.
For me, it's really interesting because I was in the hospital when it started to get really bad. But I remember because I live in a small ass town. I live in a place that doesn't show up on some maps. So I remember it was just kind of very in the back of everybody's mind. And then it suddenly became this thing. The school started sending emails about it. It kept popping up on the news. And I remember my dad's like, well, it's going to be a few weeks and then it'll blow over. We were treating it like a snowstorm or a hurricane. We got stocked up on food. And I even remember just kind of one moment I think I remember is going to the store, not wearing a mask. Because I remember it was the last time I was ever in a store not wearing a mask. I just remember waving to somebody stranger. And it was really weird because I could see that person smile. And that's a really weird imagery that stuck with me ever since that happened. And then
wow.
I had destroyed my leg in doing a stupid thing. And then I was in the hospital. And then that's when we got the email that we will not be returning to the campus for the spring semester. And then as I was in the hospital, you ever watch a zombie movie? And there's that moment where there's the moment of panic where everybody's running around because one of the patients just ripped off a doctor's face. It was like that, but calm.
It was. Do you ever see like the first episode of like The Walking Dead?
Yes, it was very much like that. And I hate to be the person comparing. It's like a movie, but because I hate it when people do that.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to do that because it really was. And I remember being this moment where the nurses came in and told my parents, "We're gonna have to have you leave because it's gonna be on essentially only anybody absolutely needs to be in here." And then I remember they as this was going on, that like nurses started leaving. Oh, they tested positive, or they were in contact with. And I remember wings of the hospital were being shut down and getting moved around to essentially be safer. And it's a miracle I never got infected, because I probably would have been screwed if I did, because I was in bad shape. Like I was like out of surgery, so like not exactly if you've ever just gone out of like a surgery to do with like anything that's like a trauma, not trauma, but like a sudden injury that's like needs surgery, you're not in good shape. You feel sick and terrible and weak. And if I had gotten COVID, that might have been bad for me. And then I kind of remember just getting home, and I remember healing because I had my leg, and spending the whole summer healing. And I think, either way. But then I remember when I healed and I could finally start walking around again, the disappointment of not being able to go see any of my friends, go do anything, go anywhere, because that wasn't the world anymore. We were still in this virus. But then I think the more angry thing was at the end of summer, hearing about countries like Australia, New Zealand, even fucking Britain, maintaining some level of normalcy because they had managed it better than we did.
Yeah.
And then Tyler, go ahead and tell us about your experience, and then we'll talk about the next big chapter.
I remember because we were still at school when it was starting to go down, and especially like in Italy, where we had friends like studying abroad, and they're just like panicking, trying to get home because it's getting really bad in Italy. And like, oh, this is like scary now. But at that point, we really didn't have any cases in the United States. But then I'm like, okay, China is where it started. Obviously, is going to be pretty bad there. And then Italy was kind of just caught off guard by surprise now because they didn't expect it to come over there. And then now they're absolutely being devastated. So we, in theory, United States should be prepared for this, right? Like we should be ready. We should have precautions in place. So when I saw 1-2 cases popping up in the United States, I'm like, all right, contact trace those people. It'll be fine. And it was far from fine because we dropped the ball hard. One of the last times
we threw the ball away. We said bye.
I remember I went
what we did? You ever see like an old Three Stooges movie where all three of them go for the ball at the same time and they bump into each other and in the way and the ball lands dead center? That's what we did. That is America.
I'm from New York City, so for a while my city was the worst in the world. So there was a period of time where people in New York City are just dropping like flies, and it was devastating to be around. But I remember the last time I went to the city, like before wearing masks was a normal thing, and I was just gonna meet up with some friends. We were having a good time, but I remember on the train heading into Manhattan, there was a dude like across on the other side. He's just coughing, and I like, this is before anyone's wearing masks, but I'm just like, no, I'm not dealing with this. And I had a bottle of hand sanitizer. I was ready. Like every single thing I touched. This is before anything was closed. Everything I touched was like, I gotta sanitize everything. And then very soon after that is when everything started going south. And I wasn't very personally affected by it. Like I didn't really know many people who had corona, but somebody in my family had a stroke and he passed away because the hospitals were not safe to go to. So that's the inadvertent effect of corona there. And it was it was like so depressing knowing how little aid that New York was getting from the federal government, even though New York is supposed to be like one of the crowning achievements of America. And it was just like, the federal government's really gonna leave us behind right now while people are literally dying. And then you have Donald Trump on TV saying we'll be fine by April. You'll be able to go to church on for Easter and shit like that. I'm like, no, you're fucking wrong. People are dying every single day. You can't it's not gonna, just because it got hot, it's just not just gonna go away.
Yeah, and then on top of that, we had the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I'm not going to harp on this part too much because we covered a lot of the racism of this presidency, but we saw him support a police force under what he called law and order, which is a classic fascist nomenclature for basically saying, yeah, no, I want total control and I'm okay with this abuse of power. And we saw police beat up American citizens every day. And we saw military-grade weapons used on American citizens every day. And some weapons that are banned in war. So, yeah. I mean, take that as you will. You are less than how they think of the enemy in war.
And it's so, I think, prevalent how that coincides with coronavirus. I went to several protests in Boston and in Providence, Rhode Island. Black Lives Matter protests, and everyone there was wearing a mask. That needs to be recognized. I had, my mask on, and I had every protest. I had these 2 pairs of lab goggles that I brought with me in case we got maced or tear gassed.
You're gonna need something more heavy duty for tear gas.
I mean, anything helps.
Anything helps. That will help you run away, but
particularly, for people, I didn't bring it for myself, more so for people who I knew would be more likely to get targeted in those situations. Anything helps. We had water bottles with holes poked in the top, things like that. And the evil, and yes, I'm using that word, of any group that, first of all, has the authority in a situation. Second of all, is at fault for mass suffering, that chooses to use weapons like mace and tear gas during a global pandemic that is ravaging our country, a pandemic that predominantly attacks the lungs and a person's ability to breathe. People die choking on their own bile, choking on the air they're trying to breathe from coronavirus because of the way that it attacks their immune system. And those are your weapons of choice, things that target the way that you breathe. There is an extra level of evil in that. And I don't care if anyone is going to try to say, well, that's just what they use. No, it's deliberate.
I think the picture that will stick with me from that protest was a picture of a child wearing a Batman costume on the shoulder of their father being met by a police officer pointing a grenade launcher at the child. A child wearing a Batman, and then this leads into my next part. This would all come together. We'd have our election. At the election, who won, ladies and gentlemen?
Joe Biden.
Joseph R. Biden.
Joseph Robinette Biden.
Robinette.
Oh my God.
You didn't know that was his middle name?
No, I assumed it was like Robert.
No, it's Robinette.
I don't care enough about Joe Biden to find out what the R stands for.
I just thought that's funny. And Trump had been saying that he wouldn't accept the win. And then we saw the coming to light of things like QAnon. Because QAnon could have been ignored before this point, I'd say, pretty easily. Because QAnon, they only had 1 or 2 terrorist attacks linked to them. That's
in the US, that's a small number.
Yeah, they're lone wolves. They're lone wolves working as a part of a large pack of people, but they're lone wolves. And
they started saying there will be this storm that we will execute all the Democrats. And flash forward to January 6th. January 6th, the Capitol was stormed. They did not kill, thank God they did not kill any of the politicians there, because
But they plan to, and that needs to be.
They killed a police officer while doing so. A woman was shot in the throat. Another man was tasered himself to death when he accidentally tasered his testicles. A woman was trampled to death wearing a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Another man committed suicide after the events. And that is what their president got them. A moment of violence where we saw the police do nothing because...
No, the police did something. They opened the gates. On video, opened the gates, ushered people in.
Took selfies with
I'm not the defend the police guy, but that first video that came out, they were actually... I will say this. The police could have done more, but they were trying to put them into like an overflow. Have you ever been at a concert? They'll have these overflow zones.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were trying to do. They didn't do it properly, so they basically end up letting everybody in. But one round of tear gas, one round of pepper balls from paintball guns would have ended that all. Nobody needed to die. And you know what? I've heard a lot of people, people I know and people I'm friends with say that woman deserved to die, but she didn't need to die.
No, she didn't. And I think it's important to say that, like, while there are circumstances where you can say a act of violence leading to death was warranted or justified or whatever, that's never what you want. I mean, I am a person who is in favor of the abolition of the death penalty. I don't care what you did. I don't think that anyone has the authority to kill you. No one should die. Was she doing something where the use of, force that led to death was to an extent justified? Yes. You are participating in a coup d'etat. You are trying to overthrow the government, to kidnap government officials, to kill government officials. You are participating in an insurrection. It should have been expected by those people that it was a possibility. But no, she should not have died. You're absolutely right.
And then this brings the end of the Trump presidency on January 20th. Christ, this feels like it was years. Years and years.
Literally this week.
Like 3 days ago.
I remember my dad and I were driving and I just said to him, "Hey, remember 3 years ago when we voted for Joe Biden and he won? Yeah, that was cool." And it was literally like 2 weeks after the election was confirmed. The military is now currently occupying. National Guard is occupying Washington, D.C. because of the threat. People have been getting arrested across the country, some being released, some probably not.
Yeah, I just I got a newsstand notification that said the Justice Department and FBI debate not charging some of the rioters. I'll be looking into that later because all of them should be charged in jail.
I don't think absolutely everybody there who is charged. The people who are provoking things, the guy with the zip ties, it should definitely be tried and never see the light of day. But there are some people there who I think don't need jail, but rehabilitation that is not of our prison system.
I mean, that we don't have a rehabilitation system in this country. No, so you give those people the next best thing, which is keeping them away, because those people are a danger to the American public. Drug dealers, people who smoke weed, like, you're giving them life and you're going to let these people who try to overthrow the government go? Absolutely bonkers to me.
I don't agree with the fact that people should do drugs. I don't agree with people who do real drugs, but I can say this by far. They're far less of a threat to me than any of those people at the Capitol were.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And then this leads me to the last part I'm going to bring up is what happens now? Because we are in a part of politics where it seems the right is divided between the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump party. And there's talks of them breaking off into the Patriot Party, who is linked directly to the Charlottesville riots or attack or whatever.
So the Nazi party.
And
Yeah.
The
than
Nazi light party.
Yeah. Diet fascism or full fascism?
Anti-Antifa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Antifa. That
Divide
killed me.
now. Divide them fraction.
Yep.
Yeah.
The
Reduce
Fa
the number, babe.
And Holocaust, and it seems like some of the right is going full Holocaust denial, mask off with their beliefs.
Oh, for sure.
Like
Because
the
that
And-
pokes holes in their
guy.
ideologies.
It seems like every Republican who's stuck with Trump, Ted Cruz, Shawley, Matt Gaetz, is trying to gun to be the next Trump for the election.
And none of them will be.
No. Ted Cruz is a man who is so hated by everybody.
No one
That
likes Ted Cruz.
His roommate said, if Ted Cruz had every single belief I did, if he was a Democrat, etc., I would only hate him 1% less than I do right now.
Yeah. I mean, I just that
and
man like let Donald Trump like come for his neck, come for his wife's neck, his family, and then said, "Yeah, like I'll overthrow the government for you, daddy." Like, sure. What?
And
What?
also, Lindsey Graham once said that if somebody were to kill Ted Cruz in the Senate and you held the trial of the murder in the Senate and the Senate voted on it, they would probably get a pardon.
Leave it to Texas. Texas is going to go blue over the course of the next couple of years.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
one thing that's
that
coming.
is
That's one thing that's coming, I will say.
Yeah, and the exodus of the right-wing public figures from California is interesting to me, such as Elon Musk and Joe Rogan moving to and Elon Musk isn't, he's just whoever's going to give him money. He's going to try to cling to the Democratic Party now.
At least publicly.
Ben Shapiro said he's uprooted from California now, is putting his company in Nashville and plans on producing
Yeah,
right-wing
Ben Shapiro can be
movies.
uprooted from planet Earth as far as I'm concerned. I don't really care what he does.
Ben Shapiro's a little man. I'm sure if the three of us got together, we can like yeet him to some other country.
I would love that.
We'll just shove him in a locker and slingshot him
Just
across
say
some border.
hypothetically, we remove Ben Shapiro from power and shove him over there.
I just want you to know, Ben Shapiro thinks we're all anti-Semitic for making fun of him now.
Three Jewish people sitting in a podcast.
Well, like kind of 2 1/4 Jewish people.
2 1/4 Jewish people.
2.5 Jews.
Jews.
Well, I'm sure because we all are related to people who voted for Obama, we're not true Jewish people.
Oh yeah, no, can't
According to
possibly.
him.
People who recognize, that Israel is committing.
And yeah, so it seems like the right has collapsed in on itself. Not to say there's not still a threat. The left is seeming left and the Democratic Party are seeming hopeful.
I mean, in all honesty, I have no hope for the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party is a group of spineless normies who want only normalcy, who want centrism, and centrism is fictional. And here's why. It's because centrism is not a set of beliefs. It's a position on a scale that changes constantly. And where we are pushing further right, where we have been pushing further right for years and years and years in this country, centrists are just what Republicans were 20 years ago.
In any other country, our Democratic Party would be their right wing.
Right. Like AOC, who is like socialist, like leftist scum.
She's a
like whatever.
Chinese communist agent.
She in most other liberal countries is a centrist. And that's not to say like AOC. So I totally dig AOC, and I think that she gets a lot of hate from leftists that she doesn't deserve, and even more hate from everyone else that she doesn't deserve.
I'm not a socialist. I will say this. I'm a progressive populist. I want what's in favor of the majority of the country. There are things on socialist views I disagree with. We could talk about Second Amendment debate about that all day. I don't believe certain aspects of education should be free for everybody. But at the end of the day, I want people to not starve, have a place to sleep, and be okay if they ever injure themselves.
And the fact that there's people that disagree with you is so shocking and so gross. Like I had a conversation, and I won't say who it was with, but I was talking to a friend of mine last year, maybe freshman year, about raising the minimum wage. And she was talking about how she doesn't think that everyone deserves to be paid a living wage. And I was like, you work at a grocery store. And she was like, well, yeah, but I'm like 19, so it's different.
I posted something on Snapchat about how Amazon's trying to get rid of unions. And the first person to message me was a former roommate of mine who shall remain unknown, who said, I work for Amazon. We don't need new unions. It would only hurt us. He's the son of a millionaire.
Literally. I worked for Amazon and the guilt was too much, so I left. I was like, $15 an hour is so good, but I can't do it. I can't.
I applied, but they wouldn't take because I was broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns
to
out
to anyone considering being an Amazon shopper, just get Instacart instead. It's not worth selling your soul to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, the problem is when you live in a place that's near absolutely nothing, you have to compromise with evil sometimes. So, yeah, forgiveness if you have to, but also,
no judgment.
So
but...
we're wrapping up here. This was a good venting.
Oh, yeah.
We will continue with our normally restored history programs. But before we go, we do our questions. And this week's question is a fun one, at least for me, because I kind of already enjoy doing this. To our guest, Tyler, my faithful co-host, if you were to be a reenactor for any time period, whether it be civilian or military, which time period would you choose?
Oh, that's an easy one. It'd be so dope to be one of the fucking elephant riders on Hannibal's army coming out of the Second Punic War down Italy over there. That'd be awful because so many Carthaginians died from the cold and on the way to Italy. So like it was pretty shit. But like once they got over there and they're stomping all over the place, that's like the ultimate power fantasy. It's probably pretty cool.
I also like that because most like cavalry reenactors have to own their own horses, so that implies you now own an elephant, Tyler.
Yes, that's another thing that's absolutely dope.
How about you, Alessandra?
So I will not lie to y'all. The first thought that came into my head was, well, which authentic outfits do I want to wear?
True. You are at a terrible disadvantage versus Tyler.
Because the first, as a kid, I grew up going to King Richard's Fair all the time, and I used to want the medieval dresses and the flower crowns. They were so pretty. But I do very much have a fascination with ancient history. It's my favorite kind of history, partially because it's the least problematic.
I don't know about that.
I would say that it is, especially in terms of
evolutionary. All Spartans were pedophiles. Just gonna say that.
Well, no, I'm talking like even further back, even further. Yeah. But I will say that I would be very interested to participate in any ancient Greek or ancient Roman activity because of the more, not politically but socially liberal kind of aspects of the way that like society was constructed, in the sense that like in ancient Rome there were gay people and it was fine. Yeah. So like if I could go like be gay in ancient Rome, like for the sake of a reenactment, and wear like gold and shit, like that would be cool.
Woman, but I wouldn't really go.
Yeah, I am also a woman, but like we're reenacting. We're not going back in time, Tyler.
Women did have a significant amount of power in Rome, and
yeah, it depends on which Rome you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because Rome did go through some phases. For me, I've kind of been getting into Civil War, but I'm thinking about, personally, I'm actually saying this because I'm thinking about changing. I think I'm going to be British soon for the Revolutionary, maybe, because more comfortable. But for me, if I could choose anyone, as terrible as it is as an event, but World War I just seems so interesting to me. But
yeah, I mean,
we're shooting it. I don't know.
So it's like, what do you want to learn about? I'm always down to learn about something.
What I am jealous of, and other countries have it, and particularly is like, I would love to do like the medieval combat stuff.
Oh yeah,
that'd be so fun.
But I also know me, and I see that's a hospital trip every week for me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, but but thank you for appearing on this podcast. We'll be back next week, folks.
Fun.